Good morning. Wanted to read a little bit and comment. It's about the Trinity. You know, temperature here changed dramatically in these past days. We were having something between 35 and 45 degrees Celsius, and now it diminished dramatically, and there's even predictions of rain. The sun, you see, has always been seen allegorically as a triad. The sun as a creator, that's one aspect of the sun. It creates life. Without it, everything dies. The sun as a preserver, it maintains, it sustains life. Once it's created, it sustains it for a period of time. That's another aspect of it. And the third aspect is that the sun also a destroyer. Yeah, the sun destroys. In these past 5 weeks, we've had extremely hot temperatures. Everything dried up. The grass, the weeds, the bushes, dried up completely. It was only those who had, deep roots that survived. And eventually, fire manifests, destruction manifests, man-made or natural-made. But fires is a reality of this world. Some say it's a good thing to reset the ecosystem, to clean the forest, etc. Yeah, it could be, but I think there's less destructive ways of maintaining things clean and proper. And I think we, as stewards of this world, I suppose we, know better. We can do better. There used to be a lot less fires, like 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even in the times of my parents when they were young. Because everybody took care of the forest, they extracted, resources from the forest, you know, and everything was clean. Yeah, no fires manifested, almost none. It was something, very valuable. A forest. Well, nowadays nobody cares about forests. Everybody's just focused on their matrix, city life, and the rest is just abandoned to, to the wilds. So anyway, I'm going to read. Uh, this is interesting to me. All right. I'm not trying to convince you or change your mind. Yeah. This is interesting. It's metaphysics, you know. And this development, of ideas and thoughts, you know, it's almost like an education, and you can use this in other contexts. Doesn't mean you have to stay focused and dogmatic on just this thing. No, it kind of develops your magical, your spiritual, your metaphysical, your philosophical mind. You know, when we speak in theology for the Vedic point of view means angelology. All right, angelology. Um, when we speak in theology of first, second, and third persons, the persons being connected by opposite relation, the numerical ordering of the persons is purely conventional, not a chronological or real order of coming into being, for the persons are connascent. These persons, these triad, these three identities are almost like conjoined triples. They are connected to each other, and they all affect each other. If one changes, the other has to change as well. That's what connascent means. Persons are connascent. The Trinity is an arrangement, not a process. For example, the Son creates the Father as much as the Father the Son. For there can be no paternity without affiliation, and vice versa. And that is what is meant by opposite relation. Similarly, there can be a person without, there cannot be a person without nature, and vice versa. That is why in metaphysical mythology we meet with inversions, as for example, when in the Rig Veda, Daksa, which is another name for the progenitor, the creator, is born out of Aditi as her son, and she also of him as his daughter, or where Viraj is born out of Purusa, and vice versa. Metaphysics are consistent, but not systematic. It's a system is found only, a system is only found in religious extensions. A rigid system of thinking, is only found in religious extensions, where a giving order of persons then becomes a dogma. This is what happens when you take things literally. Yeah, you don't have a magical mind, to see, the gray areas, and you stick with, literally with things. Where a giving order of persons becomes a dogma, and it is precisely by such, quote, matters of faith, and not by a difference of metaphysical basis, that one religion is distinguished from another. That is truly a distinction without a difference. It should be observed that the connaissance of Father Essence and Mother Essence, the two forms of Brahma, though metaphorically spoken of as birth, is not of a sexual begetting, not a generation from conjoint principles. In that sense, both are equally unbegotten, they are equally unborn. It's a conjoint of principles called falling apart, deremptation, or karyokinesis. One became two, the yin and the yang. On the other hand, their common son, Agni, being co-substantial with the spirit, is at once unborn in the same sense, and born by a generation from the conjoined principles. Only the latter birth can be thought of as an event taking place at the dawn of a creative cycle, in the beginning, or once upon a time. This is how whole mythology starts. Once upon a time, it doesn't have, a specific. It means globally, simultaneously. So the Trinity is a creative myth, and when I say creative, I'm not meaning in the literal sense, because the myth of the Trinity is more like an emanation. There's an emanation between the two, the principle, the one. It's almost like the one had this alter ego, metaphorically speaking, this alter ego exists out of necessity, and these two pillars of, like the Pythagoreans used to say, according to the Fibonacci sequence, you have 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. 1 and 1, it's the principle, the two principles, right? The one and its alter ego. And in between these two pillars, the sun exists, which is number 2 and 3. Between the 1 and 1, there's 2 and 3, and the 2 and 3 is mass and magnitude, the sun. So mother, father, and son, they are co-substantial, and there's no relation in as a father, literally, right? Who was born first and who had sex with. No, that's ridiculous. It's constant and consubstantial relation, So the author then wrote something here very interesting on this kinship. He says, this kinship depends the incestuous character of so many myths of creation. It should be observed that the term myth property implies the property of the myth implies a symbolic, verbal, and iconographic or dramatic representation of the operation of powers or energy. It's just a representation, an allegory, a metaphor, an analogy. Don't take it too far. In the Egyptians used to call this myth of creation Horus, Isis, and Osiris. That came together and you know gave birth to everything. The Indians called it Shiva, Sakti, and Agni. I'm sure the North pantheon also had it. I don't know. It's Thor, Odin, and Freya, or whatever. I'm not well. I think it's Freya, right? Um, the Abrahamics, Zoroastrians, they call it the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. These are myths, of creation. Um, Nowadays, we have modern science. And what is their explanation? They just change the names. Instead of calling it Horus, Isis, or Osiris, you know, electric, dielectric, and electric, dielectric. There's also terms in electricity I can't remember right now. The dielectric, the electrical, and the other one I can't remember. The modern scientists, they say protons, neutrons, and electrons. The same bullshit with a different flavor. It's again another triad of the myth of creation. So the author says, protons and electrons, in this sense, are also mythical beings. All right? A myth, such as the Grail myth or the birth of Brahma, is neither a fairy tale nor a mystery in the modern sense of the words, but simply a presentation. He who regards the myth or icon as a statement of fact and he who regards it as fantasy are equally misled. Myth is to history as universal to particular, la raison d'être. Symbolism and imagery, it's the purest form of art, is the proper language of metaphysics. The symbol always presupposes that the chosen expression is the best possible description or formula of a relatively unknown fact, which is nonetheless known or postulated as existed. This actually was Carl Jung that said that. Traditional symbolism is also more nearly a universal language than any other. The greater part of its idiom is the common property and inherence of nearly all peoples and can be traced back at least to the 5th or the 6th millennium before Christ and to the beginnings of agriculture or there beyond. So you see, everybody tries to use symbolism, magic, philosophy, metaphysics, um, to try to, you know, explain this world. And it is only through that medium that you're going to understand anything. Those who get rigid in their worldview, in their cosmology, the ones who are focused on calculations, the ones who are focused, on The rigidness of taking everything literally, they will never, understand anything. There was this famous experiment. I think it's called Michael and Morrison or Morglinson. I'm not sure exactly. And they set out to prove the ether didn't exist. And in the end, they've proven the ether does exist, but they've brushed it under the rug. Why? Because if indeed the ether exists, all of their calculations and equations don't work. Again, the rigidness of calculation, you know, blocks 99% of the real world. Yes. They stay focused, they stay locked in dogma. They stay locked in dogma in echo chambers, and they don't let new information in. They either don't want it, they either don't understand it, you know, to each their own. I mean, it doesn't bother me. You can do whatever you want, but if you try to impose it over others, then it becomes a problem because everybody in the world has been misled. Everybody, thinks the world is a certain way. Now everybody, their perceptions have been manipulated to become a consumerist, of the system, and to benefit the 1%, of course, literally slavery. That's what, almost that I'm talking about. Everybody's been persuaded to live a certain way to benefit the 1%, and they've been fed, a small window, dogmatic, what we call modern science. They've been fed this in order to, hide them from the real world so they can behave a certain way. Um, and they feed the masses this dogma. It's all based on the science. It's all based on equations. I've watched the equations. I know the math, you know. Yeah, right. You interact with the ether and all of your equations just collapse. Yeah. It's like or Maxwell or Tesla. They said these modern scientists, they go about from equation into equation into equation, and it's all under very weak foundations, and they all collapse. When you introduce reality to it, they all collapse. Equations, that's the imagination. Most of these mathematicians, they get lost in their imagination, their own beliefs and dogmas. And people, there's this theory that if you're focused on a color, you will always see that color all around you. It's almost like all cars or all people. i- it's your perceptions are biased. That is another explanation for this. You will find evidence for the things you already know. You're not letting any no more room, for anything else. You will find evidence for everything that you already know, right? So if you focus in that color, you will find that color repeats more often. No, it's like the saying, for a hammer, everything is a nail. It's the same thing. But for a metaphysical, philosophical mind, that's not how it is at all. Things are more simpler, a lot more simpler. All right, I'm gonna shut up now. Going for a walk, check on my chickens and stuff. Have a nice day.